Moving into my new apartment at 20 was a dream come true. As a student, balancing classes and a job was no small feat, but it was worth it. I reveled in the independence and freedom. The plot of land I owned felt like a promise of a bright future. Little did I know that future would include meeting Diego. Diego and I met at a mutual friend's party. The moment our eyes met, I felt a spark. We were introduced, and as we chatted, it became clear that we had a lot in common. We talked about our studies, our jobs, and our dreams for the future. Diego was charming, with a warm smile and an easy laugh that made me feel instantly comfortable. "Do you believe in fate?" Diego asked, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. I laughed, feeling a little self-conscious. "I don't know. Maybe. I think we make our own fate." He nodded thoughtfully. "I like that. Making our own fate. It's empowering, don't you think?" We exchanged numbers that night, and soon enough, we were spending all our free time together. Our relationship progressed quickly, fueled by our mutual respect and shared goals. Within a year, we were married. It felt like the perfect union. Two young people with their lives ahead of them, ready to build a future together. We decided to construct a house on my land, a project that excited us both. The pandemic had made everything uncertain, but it also gave us the time to focus on building our dream home. Despite the challenges, the process of building the house was a bonding experience. We spent countless hours planning every detail, from the layout of the rooms to the color of the walls. "Do you think this is too bold?" I asked one evening, holding up a swatch of deep blue paint. Diego grinned. "Bold is good. Let's make a statement." We laughed as we painted, dreaming about the life we would create within those walls. When the construction was completed, we eagerly moved in, envisioning a peaceful, happy life. The first night in our new home was magical. We sat on the porch, looking out at the starry sky, feeling a sense of accomplishment and hope. "Can you believe we did this?" I said, leaning against Diego. He wrapped his arm around me, pulling me close. "We did it together. This is just the beginning, Ella." I smiled, feeling a warm glow of contentment. I can't wait to see what the future holds. As the days turned into weeks, we settled into our new life. Our routines fell into place, and the house began to feel like home. We cooked together in our new kitchen, laughing and talking about our days. We spent lazy weekends exploring the nearby parks and trails, enjoying the beauty of nature. One afternoon, as we were planting a garden in the backyard, Diego paused and looked at me, his expression serious. "I want this to be our forever home," he said. "A place where we can build a family and grow old together." I felt a lump in my throat, touched by his words. "I want that too, Diego. More than anything." We embraced, feeling the weight of our dreams and the promise of our future. Little did we know that our idyllic life would soon be disrupted by circumstances beyond our control. But in that moment, we were filled with hope and determination, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The house we had built together was more than just a structure. It was a symbol of our love and commitment. And as we stood there, surrounded by the beginnings of our garden, we knew that whatever came our way, we would face it together. Our serene life was disrupted when Diego's parents temporarily moved in with us. The summer heatwave had made their apartment unbearable, and we opened our doors to them without hesitation. At first, it seemed like a kind gesture, a way to help them during difficult times. "Diego, are you sure it's okay if we stay with you for a while? Just until this heatwave passes," his mother, Lucia, asked over the phone. "Of course, Mom," Diego replied, giving me a reassuring smile. "Ella and I would love to have you and Dad stay with us. Make yourselves at home." Lucia and Carlos arrived a few days later, bringing with them a few bags and a sense of unease that I tried to brush aside. Diego and I helped them settle into the guest room, making sure they were comfortable. At first, it was nice having them around. We shared meals together, and in the evenings, we sat in the living room, chatting and watching TV. However, As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, their temporary stay became indefinite. The once spacious house began to feel cramped. Diego's mother, Lucia, never warmed up to me. Despite my best efforts to make her feel welcome and comfortable, there was a palpable tension between us. Her constant criticisms and disapproving looks made it clear that she didn't think I was good enough for her son. "Is this how you usually cook the rice, Ella?" Lucia asked one evening, her tone dripping with condescension. "It's a bit dry." I forced a smile. "I'll make sure to add more water next time, Lucia." Her criticisms extended beyond the kitchen. She had opinions on everything from how I cleaned the house to how I dressed. It was exhausting trying to keep the peace, but for Diego's sake, I did my best. One evening, after another long day of enduring Lucia's passive-aggressive remarks, I finally spoke to Diego about it. "Diego, I know your parents are going through a tough time, but we need to talk about setting some boundaries," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know it's hard, Ella, but they're my parents. What am I supposed to do?" "I understand that, but Lucia makes me feel like a guest in my own home. I need you to back me up on this." Diego looked at me, his eyes filled with concern. "I'll talk to her, okay? I'll try to make things better." But his attempts to mediate only seemed to make things worse. Lucia took offense at the idea that I was unhappy with their presence and began to distance herself even more. The atmosphere in the house grew increasingly tense, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells. As if the situation wasn't challenging enough, Lucia's daughters and their children began visiting frequently. Our home, which was supposed to be our sanctuary, turned into a chaotic environment. The noise, the mess, and the lack of privacy were overwhelming. Diego and I barely had any time alone. Our peaceful mornings turned into loud, crowded affairs, and our evenings were filled with demands and interruptions. One afternoon, as I was trying to concentrate on my studies in the living room, Lucia's daughters burst in with their children in tow. "Hey, Ella. Hope you don't mind, but we thought we'd bring the kids over to play in the backyard," one of them said cheerfully, not waiting for a response. "Sure," I replied, forcing another smile. "The more, the merrier." The house was soon filled with the sounds of running feet, laughter, and the occasional tantrum. I retreated to the bedroom, feeling like I had nowhere else to go. That night, as Diego and I lay in bed, I finally let my frustration show. "Diego, we can't go on like this," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "Our home doesn't feel like our home anymore. We need to find a solution." He reached for my hand, his grip firm but gentle. "I know, Ella. I know. I'll talk to them again. We'll figure this out together." But deep down, I wondered if things would ever truly change. As if the situation wasn't challenging enough, Lucia's daughters, Rosa and Maria, and their children began visiting frequently. What started as occasional visits quickly turned into a regular occurrence. Our home, which was supposed to be our sanctuary, turned into a chaotic environment. The noise, the mess, and the lack of privacy were overwhelming. Diego and I barely had any time alone. Our peaceful mornings turned into loud, crowded affairs, and our evenings were filled with demands and interruptions. One Saturday morning, I woke up early, hoping to enjoy a quiet cup of coffee on the porch. Just as I settled into my chair with my favorite book, I heard the sound of car doors slamming and children's excited voices. "Ella, we're here," Rosa called out cheerfully as she walked towards the house with her 3 kids trailing behind her. I forced a smile and waved. "Good morning, Rosa. Come on in." The children immediately ran past me into the house, their loud footsteps echoing through the hallway. I sighed and put my book down, knowing that my peaceful morning was over. Diego joined me on the porch, looking concerned. "Are you okay?" I was hoping for a quiet morning, I admitted, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "But I guess that's not happening." He squeezed my hand. "I'll talk to them. They shouldn't just show up like this." As the day went on, the house filled with more people, Maria arrived with her 2 kids, adding to the chaos. The children played loudly in the living room, leaving toys scattered everywhere, while Rosa and Maria chatted animatedly with Lucia in the kitchen. I tried to set boundaries, to carve out some space for us, but my efforts were met with resistance. Lucia seemed to take offense at every suggestion I made, interpreting my need for space as hostility. The children were constantly underfoot, and the house never seemed to be quiet. I felt like a stranger in my own home. "Do you think you could keep the kids outside for a while?" I asked Rosa one afternoon, trying to be polite. "I need to get some work done." Rosa gave me a puzzled look. "They're just kids, Ella. They need space to play." "I understand, but I really need some quiet," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Lucia, overhearing our conversation, chimed in. "Ella, they're just children. They shouldn't have to tiptoe around the house." Feeling defeated, I retreated to the bedroom, closing the door behind me. I could still hear the noise, but at least it was somewhat muted. That evening, I finally broke down. As Diego and I lay in bed, I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. "Diego, I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice shaking. "I feel like our home has been invaded. I can't relax, I can't work, and I can't enjoy our space." He pulled me close, his expression pained. "I know, Ella. This isn't fair to you. I'll talk to them tomorrow, I promise. We'll figure something out." But his attempts to mediate only seemed to make things worse. The next day, Diego gathered his family in the living room to have a serious conversation. "Mom, Rosa, Maria, we need to talk about boundaries," he began, trying to keep his tone calm. "Ella and I need some space and quiet. This is our home, and we can't have it feel like a daycare every day." Lucia immediately bristled. "Are you saying we're not welcome here, Diego?" "That's not what I'm saying," he replied, struggling to keep his composure. "We love having you here, but we need to find a balance. Ella needs her space to work and study." Rosa looked hurt. "We just wanted the kids to have a place to play. We didn't think it was such a big deal." I stepped in, trying to explain. "It's not about not wanting you here. It's about needing some boundaries so that we can all coexist peacefully." The atmosphere was tense, and it was clear that Lucia felt we were being unreasonable. The conversation ended without a clear resolution, and the visits continued as usual, leaving me feeling even more frustrated and helpless. One afternoon, as I was trying to concentrate on my studies in the living room, Lucia's daughters burst in with their children in tow. "Hey, Ella, hope you don't mind, but we thought we'd bring the kids over to play in the backyard," one of them said cheerfully, not waiting for a response. "Sure," I replied, forcing another smile. The more, the merrier. The house was soon filled with the sounds of running feet, laughter, and the occasional tantrum. I retreated to the bedroom, feeling like I had nowhere else to go. That night, as Diego and I lay in bed, I finally let my frustration show. "Diego, we can't go on like this," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "Our home doesn't feel like our home anymore. We need to find a solution." He reached for my hand, his grip firm but gentle. "I know, Ella. I know. I'll talk to them again. We'll figure this out together." But deep down, I wondered if things would ever truly change. The constant presence of Diego's family began to take its toll on our marriage. We argued more frequently, the stress and frustration seeping into our relationship. Diego was caught in the middle, torn between his loyalty to his parents and his commitment to me. I could see the strain in his eyes, but we didn't know how to resolve the situation. One evening, after another long day of enduring Lucia's passive-aggressive remarks and the chaos brought on by the children, I finally reached my breaking point. I was in the kitchen, trying to prepare dinner, when Lucia walked in and started critiquing my cooking once again. "Are you sure you should be using that much salt, Ella?" she asked, her tone dripping with disapproval. "Too much isn't good for anyone." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Thank you for the advice, Lucia. I'll keep that in mind. She continued to hover, making small comments about my techniques and choices. I could feel my patience wearing thin. Diego walked in just as Lucia was telling me I should have used a different recipe altogether. Mom, can you please give Ella some space? Diego said, his voice strained. She's doing her best. Lucia frowned. I'm just trying to help, Diego. I don't see why that's a problem. I couldn't hold back any longer. Because it's not helping, Lucia. It's making things harder for me. She looked taken aback, clearly not expecting me to stand up for myself. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, Ella. I only want what's best for my son. Diego sighed, running a hand through his hair. Mom, this is our home. We need to figure out a way to coexist without all this tension. Lucia huffed and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Diego and me alone. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes. I'm sorry, Ella, Diego said softly, pulling me into a hug. I know this isn't easy. It's not just your mom, Diego, I replied, my voice breaking. It's everything. The kids, the noise, the constant invasion of our space. I can't take it anymore. He held me tighter, but I could see the helplessness in his eyes. I promise we'll figure something out. Despite his words, the situation only seemed to worsen. Lucia became more distant, and her disapproval of me grew more overt. The children continued to run wild through the house, and I found myself retreating more and more into the bedroom, trying to find some semblance of peace. The stress and frustration bled into our marriage. Diego and I started arguing more frequently. Small disagreements would escalate into full-blown fights, our voices echoing through the house. One night, after a particularly heated argument about his family's constant presence, I broke down completely. I can't do this anymore, Diego, I shouted, tears streaming down my face. I feel like I'm suffocating in my own home. This isn't what we signed up for when we got married. Diego's face was etched with pain. Do you think I don't feel the same way? They're my family, Ella. What am I supposed to do? Throw them out on the street? No, but we need boundaries. We need our own space, or this is going to destroy us, I pleaded. He looked away, his jaw clenched. I'll talk to them again. But you have to understand, this isn't easy for me either. As the days passed, I began to notice the cracks in our relationship widening. We were both on edge, our patience worn thin by the constant demands and interruptions. Even the small moments of joy we used to share were overshadowed by the ongoing tension. One evening, after another exhausting day, I found Diego sitting alone on the porch, staring out into the darkness. I joined him, sitting down quietly beside him. We can't go on like this, I said softly, breaking the silence. He nodded, his eyes filled with exhaustion. I know. I don't know what to do anymore. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. We need to find a way to reclaim our home. For both our sakes. He turned to look at me, a glimmer of determination in his eyes. You're right. We'll find a way, Ella. Together. But deep down, I wondered if things would ever truly change. The strain of living with Diego's family was pushing us to our limits, and I feared what would happen if we couldn't find a solution. The breaking point came one sweltering evening, after yet another long day of enduring Lucia's passive-aggressive remarks and the chaos brought on by Rosa and Maria's children. As I tried to finish some work in the bedroom, I could hear the noise escalating downstairs. The children shouting, Lucia and her daughters chattering loudly in the kitchen. The walls of our house felt like they were closing in on me, and I couldn't find a moment of peace. I went downstairs to see Rosa's youngest throwing a tantrum while Maria's kids ran in circles around the living room. Toys were strewn everywhere, and the noise was deafening. I took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen where Lucia and her daughters were preparing dinner. Lucia, Rosa, Maria, can we talk? I said, trying to keep my voice calm. They all looked up at me, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "Yes, Ella," Lucia asked, her tone icy. "I appreciate that you all feel comfortable here, but we need to set some boundaries. This constant noise and lack of space is really affecting me," I said, trying to be as diplomatic as possible. Rosa scoffed. "They're just kids, Ella. They need space to play. You should understand that." Maria nodded in agreement. "We're family. We shouldn't have to tiptoe around each other." I could feel my patience wearing thin. "I'm not asking for much. Just some consideration for our space and some quiet so I can work and relax." Lucia sighed dramatically. "It sounds to me like you just don't want us here, Ella. Maybe we should leave and not bother you anymore." "Mom, that's not fair," Diego said, walking into the kitchen. He had clearly been listening from the hallway. "Ella's just asking for some respect for our home." Lucia turned to Diego, her expression hurt. "Diego, how can you say that? We're your family. We came here because we needed help, and now you're taking our side." Diego looked torn. "It's not about taking sides, Mom. It's about finding a way for all of us to live together without driving each other crazy." Lucia threw her hands up in exasperation. "Fine, we'll just pack our things and go then. Clearly, we're not welcome here." I could feel my frustration boiling over. "Lucia, that's not what we're saying. But if things don't change, I don't see how this can continue." The tension in the room was palpable. Rosa and Maria exchanged looks, clearly siding with their mother. I felt like an outsider in my own home. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Diego and I sat in the living room, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, I broke the silence. "I can't do this anymore, Diego. I feel like I'm losing myself. This isn't the life we dreamed of." He looked at me, his eyes filled with exhaustion and sadness. "I know, Ella. I know. But what are we supposed to do? They're my family. I can't just kick them out. We have to find a compromise. This isn't sustainable for any of us," I said, my voice breaking. Diego nodded slowly. "You're right. I'll talk to them again tomorrow. We need to set some firm boundaries, or we won't survive this." The next day, Diego gathered his family in the living room for a serious conversation. The tension was thick, and I could see the defensiveness in Lucia's eyes even before Diego spoke. "Mom, Rosa, Maria, we need to talk," Diego began, his voice steady but firm. "This situation isn't working. Ella and I are at our breaking point. We need to find a way to coexist peacefully, or we need to make other arrangements." Lucia's face hardened. "So, you're choosing her over us?" Diego shook his head. "It's not about choosing sides. It's about respecting each other's space and finding a way to live together without constant conflict." Rosa crossed her arms. "What exactly are you asking us to do?" "We need more quiet, especially during work hours. The kids need to play outside more, and everyone needs to clean up after themselves," Diego said. "And if these changes aren't possible, we need to seriously consider you moving back to your place, Mom." Lucia stood up, her expression one of hurt and anger. "Fine. If that's how you feel, we'll leave. We don't need to stay where we're not wanted." The room fell silent as Lucia stormed out, Rosa and Maria following her. I felt a pang of guilt, but also a sense of relief. Diego turned to me, his face a mix of emotions. "I'm sorry, Ella. I didn't want it to come to this," he said softly. I hugged him tightly. "I know, Diego, but we need to reclaim our home and our life together." The next few days were filled with packing and tense goodbyes. Despite the negative reactions, we stood firm in our decision. Lucia and the grandchildren moved back to their registered address, and the house finally quieted down. As Diego and I sat on the porch that evening, watching the sunset in peaceful silence, I felt a sense of hope for the first time in months. "We'll get through this, Ella," Diego said, squeezing my hand. "Together." I nodded, leaning my head on his shoulder. "Together."